Over the next several episodes, we will bring you leaders from across the political spectrum discussing what it really means to work together, find common ground, and move our communities forward. We hope you enjoy these insightful, real, and sometimes challenging conversations. Let's get started. Welcome to the Spirit of Bipartisanship. We are very thankful for you guys coming down. This is a place where we can come together and talk about maybe differing viewpoints and new perspectives, and very excited to talk about nuclear energy today with Representative Clark Boyd, who is a Republican representing District 46, part of Wilson County, straight out of Lebanon, Tennessee. Yep. And then we've got Representative Sam McKenzie, who is a Democrat District 15, who voraciously represents and defends Knoxville and part of Knox County. Just last night, you were really getting after it about making sure that chartered government,
absolutely.
Knoxville is included. Do not leave them out. So anyway, we appreciate you opting into this evening. You represent two folks who are very open to hearing other perspectives, and that's exactly what we're looking for tonight, because we are firm believers that none of us have all the information and the other guy just might be right. Before we get started, I wanted to ask you guys this is the first time that I've done this, but I think it's really interesting because we don't talk about this much. We say representatives. We don't take into account that you actually are real people with real jobs in most cases. And so I just want to get a little bit about who you are when you are not at the Capitol. What do you do? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in Lebanon, I have an insurance agency. I just celebrated my 20th year in business at the beginning of March. I have some rental properties that I'm kind of have built a portfolio and manage. And I am married. My wife is a teacher at Friendship Christian School, and I have two children. I have an 8th grader and an 11th grader, Wilson and Blair Ellen. So they both, my daughter just turned 14 and my son will turn 17 next month.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome.
Is it driving?
Yeah, he's driving. He was, I have heard a lot of people say that this generation of kids doesn't want to drive, but my son that was not true with him. I mean, on his 16th birthday, he was ready to get that driver's license.
He's ready to car. Yeah. What about Dylan Brandon? He's got daughters.
Yeah, so I think a lot, especially girls, she's like 15. I think she just wants other people to drive her. So I think she has very little interest in learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's very different from like when we were kids. And I was just, trying to, if I was 13, trying to, steal dad's truck to drive it across a farm.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
And so what about you, Representative?
Well, I am retired, fairly recent, about a year and a half ago, retired, 34-year career at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So I did a variety of things there at the laboratory. And my last job was I worked at the Spallation Neutron Source. It's simply put, it's a material science center. It's where they do study and work on materials, but it's the world's most powerful, energetic particle accelerator of its type. It's, innovative, cutting edge technology in 2006, and you have to keep upgrading it. So my last job was part of that power upgrade program for that. But I'm here. I do a lot of things here, but I'm also really active in my community. A lot of organizations, and that's freed up some time for me now that I can. Now I'm retired.
I was going to say, I think for most of us who are hard hitting, that's something that we think about in terms of our job, and what we do is a large part of who we are. So how's that been? Have you thrown yourself into what other organizations have you found comfort in?
Yeah, it's I try not to. It's if you want something done right away, find someone who's busy, and that a lot of folks have kind of come after, hey, you got time, you want to do this. But I'm really active with a couple of organizations in Knoxville, most of which centered around education, youth education, trying to give folks exposure and an opportunity to kind of see things from other perspectives. So and a whole lot of the kids that I work with, they've never been past the other side of town. So we'll bring them here to Nashville, see the legislative process, teach them how to do speech and radio production, just life skills and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
enjoyable.
I had my boys came down to the floor last night. They're 11 and 12. I have two others as well. I wouldn't take them. I could barely take these guys. But it's such an experience that I think, who was it? I think it was Chairman Williams who we had on, and he said, if you don't walk by the Capitol or each day and think, wow, is it really me? Should I be here? Then you probably shouldn't be there. And I think that it's easy to take for granted when, even for me, that I get to go down there and just listen and hear what's going on. And so to have my boys down there, it was super easy right there. One of their baseball coaches is John Ray Clemens. And so I was like, hey, can you take them down there? Yes. And they're there. And I was just sitting up in the gallery watching. And I thought, wow, this is a really cool experience that your children can be exposed to this.
I bet he's an intense baseball coach.
They actually said, he'll hear this for the first time here. They actually said, he's really serious at baseball. You guys are going to think this is funny. He's really serious at baseball, but he gave us a lot of candy on the floor. I think we like him better in work mode. He seems relaxed. Well, okay. And then a little icebreaker question. Tell us something about you that most people may not know.
Well, interesting. Just one thing, okay.
Or feel free. We've got all three.
No, I better not. Yeah, not bring a couch out here. Y'all can have counseling. One, I was a huge stutterer growing up. I couldn't finish a sentence without stuttering, and I've gotten to speech classes as a probably second, third grader. Went to speech therapy center there at University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and really I stuttered all the way up and into my adulthood. I was probably mid-20s. And I don't know. It just said, doggone it, I'm tired of this. So, but it was that's one thing that a lot of folks don't know about me.
Do you still have to think about it when you
comes
speak?
And goes, but it is mental. You have to kind of put yourself in a state. Because what I would tell people, even third and fourth grade, when you go around the room reading sentences, I would count out the sentence and I would know exactly what word I was going to stutter on. So it's all mental. There were hurdles there. And just had to focus. I would say maybe once a year, maybe once every other year. Yeah. And people will hear me and I say, yeah, you have been stuttering a whole lot. And we're in this whiskey bar. Whiskey will make me stutter as well.
We've had none. We're just in a nice surrounding. But well, do you think that, I'm always interested because sometimes I think that when people have something to overcome and they push through it, they really are kind of hard pressing. They accomplish a lot of things. Do you think that affected you in sort of the heights that you've been able to climb?
Probably. I've always had a lot to say. I had a lot that I wanted to talk about and say, and I just didn't for a long time. So, yeah, I do think that was part of that motivation, say, I need to push through these things. So.
Well, I will say that when I would go sit in committees, like last session, I would always think, I don't know who that is, but he's such an eloquent speaker and always he doesn't speak unless he's got something really good to say. And so I would have never known that.
Well, thank you.
How you going to follow that up?
You know what?
That's a good story.
That was good. That was good, Sam.
He's got plenty.
As an adult in my mid-20s, I developed type 1 diabetes. And it's the kind that you have to take insulin. I got an insulin pump. And it brought my career in the Army Reserve to an end. I had been in for about 11 years, and I got medically discharged. And, 1 minute you have nothing wrong with you, and you can do anything you want, and you're not. And then the next you're being told, be careful, you're fragile, watch this, take this medicine. And it kind of motivated me to try to get out there and just live life to the fullest. And so I said, I'm going to take up long distance cycling, and I started cycling and started doing these 100-mile rides and 150-mile overnight rides, and took a mission team to Honduras on a mission trip, and then the what I'm doing now, I decided with a friend that I was going to walk the entire Appalachian Trail. And so it starts in Georgia and goes all the way to Maine, and so we do about 100 miles a year.
Nice.
And we started in 2015 in Georgia. and we are currently in Maryland. We walked the last 100 miles that we did. We started in Virginia, walked through West Virginia, and went to Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, and walked across and touched Maryland, and then came home. And that's where we're going back this year.
Yeah.
But that has been
awesome.
a challenge, but not too much. I've figured it out. But you run into people on the trail. Maybe you got your shirt off and you're changing. Somebody says, "What is that?" And they see my insulin pump and my continuous glucose monitor, and I'm proud of that, because I think for a lot of people that are diabetic, they think they can't do things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just set it a mission, that to myself, that I'm going to get out there and I'm not going to let it keep me from doing anything. So I'm not sure I would be walking the Appalachian
That's what I'm
Trail
saying. Something you're doing
Probably
more than
would've.
you
if I
do
weren't
you were
diabetic.
perfectly
Yeah,
healthy.
Right.
I'm not sure I would have ever gotten
Yeah.
on a bicycle and ridden 100
Yeah.
miles, except I wanted to prove that I could do it because I'm diabetic.
Right.
That is
So,
so cool.
yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And so I know that you served, and then your dad also served, right, in the military?
He did, yeah. He served during the Vietnam era. He was in the Navy, and actually didn't want me to go in the military. They talked me out of doing it right out of high school, and kept me from going to a military school. It kind of just talked me out of it, and then, but once I turned 18, my freshman year of college, I enlisted, and so decided to kind of compromise with them, and I went in the reserves, and that most of my time was either in the Army National Guard or the Army Reserve.
Yeah. I think that's what I really like about sitting in these committees is, unless you've printed the agenda and you're really following it, which I'm not. I tell people, they're like, "Are you a lobbyist?" I'm like, "No, I just like to go when I want to go, to listen to what I want to listen to, and then leave." You learn so much about just the humans that are sitting. How I learned, when they were doing the Veterans Bill, about your dad and his experience and different things. And so it's really interesting what you pick up from people in the middle of talking about the issues. Speaking of issues, okay.
It's making me think about the movie, what's it called, The King's Speech.
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen
Yes,
that.
I have
It's
seen,
great.
yeah.
It's fascinating.
That is.
Great story.
Sometimes movies like that will make me start stuttering again, so I have to watch. I can't.
because it's mental.
It is.
So your
It
mind
is
goes there.
mental, yeah,
That is really wild. Tennessee's long been a leader in nuclear innovation, from Oak Ridge's role in the Manhattan Project to cutting edge research today. And I know that there's been a lot of chatter. When I told somebody, I was coming here tonight, we were going to talk about nuclear energy, and they were like, "Wow, that sounds exciting." And I said, well, actually, there's quite a bit of chatter at the legislature about energy and what we're going to do next and how we're going to cross this bridge. And so I guess I just wanted to have maybe Representative Boyd's tell us a little bit about kind of why you wanted to talk about this issue and get us rolling.
Let's start by framing it by what does the energy grid look like in Tennessee in terms of, I did a little bit of research on this, and the numbers were, I thought, mind-blowing from what I would have guessed was the case to what is the case.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I need to say this. In the legislature, if you know anything about energy, it's not hard to become the leader in it. And so, but you pick the one guy that probably knows more than I do. But I've chaired the committee in the House, the subcommittee that it all flows through. And I'm an insurance agent in my regular job. I mean, you've got a nuclear guy here, so he's going to know a lot more. But I will tell you what did it for me. When I got this committee assignment, I used to chair it was called the Consumer and Human Resources. We dealt more with labor and workforce issues. And I got the Business and Utilities subcommittee, and immediately sort of immersed myself in the things that we deal with, which is any type of utility from natural gas, water, electricity, even broadband fits in that category. And I got appointed to go to the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute. And it is it's like a summer 2-part class that you go to, and it's for American and Canadian legislators that deal with energy policy. And the first part was in Washington State. The second part was in Washington, D.C. later in the year. And when we got out there, they just set you down and taught you everything about electricity. What is three-phase? What's the difference between volts and amps? How is electricity generated? Electromagnetic generation. And then we went out and toured a nuclear plant, a hydro plant, a coal plant, and we had everyone come make their pitch to us and explain their electrical generation. And it became apparent to me really quickly that as we start winding down some of our fossil production in this country, and we're doing that because of environmental and emissions reasons, but as we're doing that, And the chatter that you hear a lot of is clean and renewable, and we all want that, but it's just not as reliable. I mean, as it needs to be. I mean, the sun just doesn't shine at night, and the wind doesn't always blow, and so I realized that we've got to take a lead on this, and so nuclear blew me away, and you know, we kind of got away from nuclear back in the 70s. It seemed dangerous, and then we had an almost generation of people that very few people in America were majoring into that. Universities got away from it, and most of our nuclear
So that's
workforce.
3 Mile Island. That was a
Yeah,
Three Mile
big
Island
bad
was
thing
yeah,
happened
that
in
was
New York.
and Chernobyl, and people had a
Chernobyl,
fear of it, and that
And
was
still do,
old
right?
nuclear.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you when you say it,
Fukushima.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
The fact that everyone knows those names,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
those three.
But there actually wasn't a lot of
wasn't.
deaths or anything with that. For most of that time, the United States Navy was training the people that work in nuclear now. But we are on the cusp of a nuclear renaissance. And when you hear the term new nuclear, it's newer nuclear technology that's coming out. It's less about the one gigawatt,
What's Bar?
watts bar type of light water reactors, and there's new generations that are coming out, and they're smaller.
Yeah.
And so we call them SMR, small modular reactors. And so none of those have been made yet, but we have the ability and we know how to. And I think everyone is waiting for someone to build the first one. And because one has never been built before, it's going to go over budget, and that is called first of a kind cost. That's the real problem right now. We would love to see TVA build the first one, but TVA has a debt limit, a debt ceiling that they're up against. And if they build the first one and go over budget, we're just going to have to eat it. And so I think what we're hoping for, and I know this is strange to hear Republicans say this, but I'd really like to see the federal government say, somebody's got to build the first one, and we will cover your first of a kind cost.
right?
And let TVA be the leader in that, because they are even though they're a public utility, they're kind of private, but I think they would be willing to share their technology and the mistakes that they made with the rest of the country. So I
Right.
think that's the logical choice.
Right.
I know you see some smaller like nuclear, like in places like France. I know France is a big nuclear adopter. How did those? And I don't know much about the reactors, but they seem like they're smaller than kind of the Watts Bar, Sequoia.
No, they're actually same size.
Same size.
It
Okay,
just,
so that answers that.
Yeah, I actually had an opportunity. We have a governing body or organization to help
Yeah.
us train. It's the a national conference of state legislators, and I had the opportunity to go to France, and they send us there to become advocates for nuclear power. So we toured. What happened in France was when, as you said, once 3 Mile Island happened and nuclear started to go down, France doubled down.
That's right. Yeah.
And so now they're roughly, we're about 25% of power coming from nuclear. They're about 75%. So they really went in. And what they went in with was a singular technology. You talked about Watts Bar. That's one type of reactor.
And just for
Brownsbury.
listeners, what is Watts Bar?
Watts Bar is a 2-unit nuclear reactor in Meigs County, Dayton area. It's the Tennessee Valley Authority operates it.
Right next to my hometown of Cleveland,
That's
Tennessee.
right. Right now, you can probably see the towers there from
Yep,
parts.
driven by them many times. Yeah.
So we have several dotted throughout the TVA footprint, and Watts Bar is one. But in France, what they did was with singular technology, kind of state run, and it's been really, really effective for them. And we're not in that position as Clark said, but it really we're on the cusp of doing something really big.
Is it true? I mean, my memory in high school. So I had a chemistry teacher who worked at Oak Ridge in the summer. My memory was him telling us that Watts Bar for a long, long time, and I think even when I was in high school, they were operational, but they had no energy going outside the facility. Is that true? And I know I kind of set that up to frame the number now, which is if I was asking, I'll ask Angie because she doesn't know this, and I had no clue. What percentage of Tennessee's energy comes from nuclear?
21 to 25%.
48.
Oh.
Which to me is amazing. I would have guessed 5 or lower.
So are we 21 to 25% in the country?
That's national. Yeah, Tennessee's energy right now is 48% nuclear.
Oh.
And
12%
we shut down a few,
hydroelectric, which is also pretty fascinating. I think we're number 6 in hydroelectric power.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Are you just making this stuff up?
No, it is. I jotted down some figures. They're pretty close to that. I do want to say this, just so y'all know that old nuclear, what you have the nuclear reaction, which is really, it's heat.
Right.
It boils water, produces steam, it turns a turbine, and then it cools in those towers. The water does, and so that's how those work. And the technology moving forward on these smaller ones is going to be different than that. It won't take up as much space. What they're saying on these small modular reactors is if you did have, I don't think they build them in such a way that you shouldn't have a meltdown, but if you had some sort of contamination leak, it wouldn't exceed the 5-acre footprint that the reactors are on. And I think the hope with the small modular reactors is let's say a coal-fired power plant goes offline because maybe it's at the end of life for that particular unit. When they take it down, if they could have a factory-built SMR and go out there and hook 2 or 3 of them together, tether them together, and turn them on and use the same electrical lines that was distributing power from the coal plant, in theory, you could use the same sites. But do a small modular reactor. But we're probably a decade away from that because somebody has to build the first one, as we mentioned.
Yeah, and the as Representative Boyd said, it'd be great if the government gets involved in that. So they're actually, TVA has one kind of on the books, and it takes a long time to get that first article. There's a sister facility in Ontario, Canada, that's wanting to build the same type of technology, and maybe we could do some sharing that. It's going to be expensive. They just built the old technology nuclear reactor in Georgia called the Vogel plant, and it came in probably twice the original plant. A lot of that was because we haven't built a lot of nuclear power plants, so we've lost the skill set. We've lost the and not just, you have the engineers coming out of the University of Tennessee, but the pipe fitters and the welders to be able to weld to what they call nuclear grade, which is a lot more than the concrete that you pour out here. And so it takes a lot. But now that we built that up, what I think we need to do is just keep pushing it forward, and that's really where Oak Ridge comes into play. Because, as you know, when people hear nuclear, that they generally there's a panic that ensues. But in that part of East Tennessee, it's been the case since the Cold War days. We understand that nuclear is inherently safe. We understand that from a footprint standpoint, the material, especially small modular, is not going to get off site, and the chances of an accident are small, negligible. 3 Mile Island is still operating, so they're still operating the plant. So
I think a lot of people watch series like Chernobyl on HBO, which was actually a great series. And I don't know what the takeaway from that is, but I just think people get nervous and they think, is it going to be like that? And that's the education gap, right?
That's right.
And like what you're talking about, I have never heard anything about. So that shows how much opportunity is to
let me tell you this,
because that's fascinating
about the waste. So with traditional nuclear, you've got these nuclear rods, and I'm way oversimplifying this, and Sam can straighten me out after I do. But once you turn those on, that's base load electricity. You're really going to have to leave it on for about 6 months. And if a tornado came or there was some attack, you really would have a mess on your hands. And then that stuff, when they're finished with those nuclear rods, they are very radioactive. They have to store them. And so they're actually stored on site at the nuclear facilities in these concrete cast things that completely encapsulate them. And they monitor the heat and radiation around them. But in France, they are now recycling that and turning it into fresh uranium that they can use over again. That's very expensive. And as Sam mentioned, in France, it's like sort of a state-owned enterprise. But as this grows in America, and there is a finite amount of uranium on planet Earth, we're going to have to use the nuclear waste. And we probably could find a different word. Depleted uranium is probably not the spent fuel.
That sounds better.
You can reuse it. And they're doing that in France. And there's a company that just not relocated. They were setting up shop in Oak Ridge. They're not going to be doing that there. Right. They're going to be enriching uranium that has been mined. But I just wanted y'all to know that is there's a future in spent fuel.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's and what's folks think of nuclear waste. That's a bad term. As Clark said, all of the spent fuel that's run Watts bar these other reactors in whatever state, it's stored on site. And if you took been operating since 50s maybe, if you took all of the across the country, you could fill up a football field about 20 to 30 feet high. So that's the entire amount of spent fuel. So it doesn't. But you think about coal ash. We had a huge coal ash issue at Bull Run. The actual material from nuclear is really small. Nuclear is green, as one of the gentlemen said. If you see the material coming out, that's really a cloud. It's not smoke. They're water droplets. That's a cloud coming out of that stack. Because all you're doing is heating up water to turn that turbine. And so
tell us. So I know the last big nuke. So I do think I think that's one of those things where people are afraid of flying because they see the one crash that happens and they feel like they don't have control. And I think that's very similar with nuclear. Right? So So the last big one that I remember obviously was Fukushima. So what happened there? You probably can explain it to us in a way that
I was a kid. Yeah.
So, Representative,
that one's in the early 2000s.
Yeah,
that one was the result of the tsunami.
Gotcha.
If you remember, there was a tsunami that hit in Japan. So that created earthquakes all on the island, and Japan pretty much is an island, and it just took it out. That one was, I would say, tragic, and you don't want to say unavoidable, but Chernobyl it's a casebook text of really poor management. You have a lot, as Clark said, a bunch of heat, a bunch of material, and you have to cool this material. So they have huge pumps that operate normally, and the best we've determined now is that they wanted to take these pumps online to do a test, see if the smaller pump could carry the load. Not so much. So that created an overheating, and it went critical. And Chernobyl, it really did. The series wasn't too far off. I'd hate to say, but it also, to me, points to the amount of training. As Clark said, a lot of our training comes from the nuclear Navy. A lot of a robust system goes into that. We try to minimize doses, but a lot of folks actually died in the response. And the response wasn't necessarily what it should have been.
When you talk about ChatGPT and AI and the depletion of water sources and things like that, is the water just recycled through here, or is it? How does that work?
So if you see so far, this is for the regular plant. Most every plant is on a body of water because the intake, it uses a lot of water, and it goes out in steam to turn it. So it does consume a considerable amount of water, but not to the point that it's going to take down a water supply, especially not this TVA system. So there's a lot of water used in the process of creating steam, whether it's coal fired or natural gas. It's just a lot of water that's used. But I tell folks, at the end of the day, if we want to charge our iPhones up and we want to run our computers, we're going to need electricity. Right. So and why not do it in the most economical and safest way with the smallest footprint of waste type materials. So
and in that one, in the old nuclear that we're all familiar with, he mentioned Watts Bar and Sequoia and the Vogtle plant in Georgia. Some of the water is put back into the river, which is cooled off, but some of the newer units that we're talking about, it's all kind of self-contained, and in some cases, it's not even water. And I will tell you this: one of the things that makes the new nuclear safer is their little pellets, and there might be a different term for it, of uranium, and it's encapsulated in graphite and carbon. It looks kind of like a crackled chocolate bar. If you looked at it, you see little specks of it in there, and it's base load where it has to be turned on and left on for months at a time. You could actually flip another unit on at 4 o'clock when everybody goes home and turns their air conditioner on and you need more electricity. you could cycle it down later. And if a tornado came or something, you could actually turn them off. Or in some cases, they could be subterranean, so they're a little bit more immune from bad weather.
Right.
So they're really cool. But it's funny you brought something up, and not to get too far off topic, but it kind of is similar. When you're looking at clean and emerging energies, one of the ones that's talked about is hydrogen.
That's right.
Now, hydrogen is everywhere. And I love the idea of hydrogen because it can burn similar to a natural gas. You could put it in a diesel engine if it were tinkered with a little bit, and you could power a vehicle, but it literally turns back into water when it's combined with ozone oxygen. You get H2O.
Right.
And I've always been a little bit concerned if we really get into hydrogen, you could deplete some of your fresh water supply in drought-prone areas if you're converting gallons of water into hydrogen to have in a tank.
Right.
Although it would always turn back into water once it was used.
Right.
So that is something. I've been to some hydrogen forums and symposiums and learned about that. And I think that's something that's on the horizon too. But I think the reason I bring it up is because the problem with hydrogen now is you can't mine it or pull it out of the earth. It comes out of water, and you have to have electricity to make it. So it doesn't, if you have to burn coal somewhere in order to shock water and turn it, and electrocute it and turn it into hydrogen, then why not just use the electricity you have?
The whole chain of electricity.
Exactly.
But when nuclear gets online big time, you could say, and I'm just hypothetical here, you could have one of those SMRs and you're like, you know what, it's cooled off, it's 9 o'clock, the sun's gone down, let's devote one of those to generating hydrogen. And so you just have a big tank of water there that you're turning into hydrogen, and then you save it. It either functions as a battery where it's stored energy, or you could put it in a vehicle and drive it down the road. And so hydrogen, I think, is going to grow the use of it as nuclear grows. That's my opinion.
So these SMRs kind of sound great, but how do you know they're going to work?
Well, it's going to, the great thing about uranium and plutonium, if you get it in a certain geometry, it's going to do what they call go critical. Okay. So you're going to have fission, and you're going to generate this heat. It's just going to happen. It's just a law of nature. If I drop this cup, it's going to hit the ground. So that it will work. Will it work safely? Will it be, as Paul said, will it generate more than it takes to take it to criticality? Yes, it will. So it'll work. It's not a science problem. It's an engineering problem. How do we build it? How do we build it safely? And how do we build it relatively affordable in terms of because folks don't have an appetite for. If I say it's going to cost $500 million. People don't want to hear it cost $1 billion. So that's the piece. So before we move out on this, let's make sure that we understand all the technologies. But what I'll say about those companies that are coming to Oak Ridge, we had a special session where we gave Blue Oval a lot of money, created an exit to build that. These companies coming to Oak Ridge, we are probably, and I'm an optimist, it's going to generate more income than the Blue Oval site. We don't have as many employees, but in terms of the investment, the outside investments, and the return on investments, it's going to be through the roof.
And tell our listeners, I know some people know what it is, but explain kind of what Blue Oval is.
Blue Oval is a Ford plant. The plan is to build a Ford plant in rural West Tennessee. They had, forgot the name of a mega industrial site that they had planned to use a decade ago, and Ford probably they negotiated, the folks from tourism, economic development, talked Ford into coming to build a plant, and there's a lot of investment that the state has made into that part of the of our state. We building a new exit. There's a TCAT facility because the plan is for this to be their electric truck will be built there. So there's a lot of technology that people have to learn. So a lot of opportunities. People from Memphis, Shelby County, Jackson, and then all those rural counties in and around Brownsville and places like that. So it really should. I'm hoping it's going to be a huge boom for for that area. Because when you look at the population shift, they really are. We talked about people may or may not staying around the smaller towns.
Yeah.
That they've been leaving those smaller towns. So hopefully that'll be a magnet for
Be
them.
a magnet.
And they make the batteries there too. That's a
Okay.
big part of it
Yeah.
too. Is there's a battery manufacturer that is going to supply them, but I think supply others as well. So,
So-
there's a lot of stuff going on.
Blue oval being the Ford.
That was kind of the code word
That's the
for
code
it.
word.
Yeah.
That was Project. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is it blue?
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, so we're in the legislature. I guess when energy comes up, and I know that you guys have outside folks that come in and present from time to time. What's going on up there related to energy, and where are we in those talks?
So the governor 2 years ago at the beginning, it was about the time that I came back from that Lehigh Energy Institute. He said we want to be big in nuclear, and he put together a nuclear advisory task force or a nuclear advisory council. And I served as the House member, and then
Okay.
Senator Yeager, who was up in your area, I think because of the Oak Ridge connection, was put on there as the Senate. And what we were trying to do is to try to recruit industries to this area, like the one we just talked about, the French company, or anybody that wants to work in the nuclear supply chain. Because one of the things that I don't think a lot of people understand is that in Tennessee, we get almost 100% of our electricity from the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is a quasi-government public entity, but it's federal. The president appoints the board members to it. The only exception is the area near Kingsport, Tennessee. They get up into American Electric up in Virginia. But if it were not for Kingsport, the entire state of Tennessee would be on it. And so a lot of people, when we got on there, a lot of the engineers and everybody that didn't understand how government worked, they were just scientists. They said, why doesn't the state just build a SMR? And we said, well, we're not really in the electrical generation business. That's up to our local power companies or to TVA. And so we've been that council's been very successful in recruiting businesses here and incentivizing them to come here. And it was about $50 million, and then he threw in another 10 and 10, taking it up to 70. And I wrote these figures down. The big thing that's happening now, the two things is he has put about $12.5 million into trying to. You've heard of TCAT, the Tennessee College of Applied Technology. Those are trade level jobs. We realize now that there is a nuclear need there for trade level jobs. As Sam mentioned, we're a
Right.
nuclear grade welder or a nuclear grade concrete contractor. To learn those trades, there's that. But the big one is we recognize that TVA kind of needs some help with this if they're going to get this built. And so we committed $50 million in his budget this year for them to use toward a matching $800 million Department of Energy grant that would be matching to help them with some of those first-of-a-kind costs.
Okay. So,
I know that was a lot to...
No,
to-
no,
yeah.
no, it is. I mean, it's good because it's a lot to take this in.
It takes a team, and that I think that's what you heard. There's a lot of investment for Orano, that French company, but they can't do it by themselves. So it really is a team effort. Like when you look at the Titan Stadium, the state made an investment, Metro made an investment,
That's right.
ownership of the Titans made an investment, and hopefully when the Super Bowl comes, everyone's going to get paid.
2029.
That's going to happen, right? So likewise, and the state of Tennessee, we're positioned to be the country's foremost authority on this type of technology because we're setting it here. To me it's a small investment. It's a great investment. I'm glad that this government, this administration has done that because it just makes sense. There's very few places that are uniquely positioned. You got a national lab with all this expertise. You have the number 2 nuclear engineering school in the university, and then you got one that's starting at Tennessee Tech, which is about 100 miles away, plus all of these skilled craft positions. So it really is, I feel, our time in terms of being that.
So I think this really gets to how do each of you think about it? I think one of the things we really see in the U.S. right now, I think makes it difficult to take on these big projects like we did. TVA spun out of the New Deal when we're trying to electrify the the South that had no electricity, right?
Right,
You know,
right.
Appalachia did not have electricity. But you know, so these ideas of like, you know, the private sector can do it better versus things that the private sector simply maybe can't do, and how do you each sort of think about that? And I think what you see a lot of times is people are either in one camp or the other. Like either we need government to do these big projects. Obviously, China comes to mind as taking on a lot of enormous projects, versus thinking we're going to be able to outsource all of this and this is better for the private sector. So how do each of you sort of think about that?
Well, I'll jump in there. I am a private sector guy, but I have come to the realization as we've started seeing rolling blackouts and everything in Tennessee, um, that we have an energy shortage here. I mean, we are now oftentimes buying off of the surrounding grids. I mean, the Southern Company south of us, or MISO to the west of us, to hook up and buy electricity from them when we have a high demand or a storm comes in, and with people switching from furnaces to heat pumps, with electric cars, with data centers, with artificial intelligence, and with everyone wanting to move into this state, we're just seeing a demand for electricity that we can't keep up with. And I think the reason that I'm pushing or suggesting that the federal government should cover some of these first of a kind costs is because I think in a true free market, if the public says, "Hey, we want to get cleaner," and sometime maybe over the next 30 or 40 years, if you could get off coal and get us to something cleaner like nuclear, I think we could probably make the transition without government. But because government is requiring them to shut down the coal-fired power plants and to shift away from that, then I think there needs to be some funding to help with the speed up the transition to nuclear. Now we are filling that gap right now with natural gas. Natural gas is clean, and but natural gas is geared more toward those peak times, because generally you're running a single cycle or combined cycle turbine engine basically to generate electricity, and those aren't meant. I mean, that's not my specialty, but they're not meant to be ran wide open all the time. Usually, you're looking for hydropower or slow burning coal or
Right.
something like that to heat water, boil it, and create steam. And so that's the reason that I'm pushing for the government to get involved, is because I think in a lot of ways, and Sam may disagree with me on this, but I think the environmental push from the federal government is why we're shutting down well functioning power plants right now, and we have to do something.
Right.
We have to do something.
There are. I heard someone. I think they put it very eloquently. I don't think government is built or made to be efficient. It's made to be robust. I think we need a robust government. And what a robust government does is support technologies that that are emerging. The technology may not work. That's the point of doing research. It's research for research's sake. You know, when the folks started the Manhattan Project, they didn't know it was on a piece of paper, and they took that piece of paper and brought it to reality. You know, multi-billionaires can't do that. It takes a government to be able to do that. So if we're going to solve these big, large-scale problems, you're going to have to do it with government investment. So I agree with Clark that this is one of those times where we have to belly up to the bar and say this is going to cost money. We're not going to sugarcoat it. This would cost money, but here's your long term investment. Here are the successes that you may not even live to see, but they have to come. At the end of the day, you know, when we talk about the actual coal-fired or gas-fired facilities, getting that coal out of the ground, I think we can all agree did a lot of destruction to people's lungs, to people's lives, to health. And so getting that gas, they're having to do what's called hydrofracturing of the subsurfaces to get to those gas pockets, and that may be causing us problems as well. We don't know. So, you know, if we're going to do something that we know fully understand that we understand what the waste profile is going to be, then I think nuclear is the way to go. And I agree. I'm I'm an elected Democrat, but the sun's going to only shine so much. And really, frankly, I'm from East Tennessee. I don't want a lot of windmills on top of our beautiful mountains and vistas. So there's a mix, and they can, there are places where that works. But here in East Tennessee, and we pretty much dammed up every river that we can, so we can't do any more hydro. So this is our alternative. Like I said, folks want to charge their phones. If they want Amazon to show up on time every time, those data centers require a lot.
I just read an article that said that there's this new study that just came out of some environmental institute in Colorado that basically says for Chat GPT to do one email burns about 8 ounces of water. And so we were like, how's that possible? Because there's all these data centers being built that are huge consumers of water. And so just thinking about like, what is this increasing proliferation of energy chewing things that we use? Your iPhone may be pretty efficient, but you're right. Like thinking about the chain of where all this energy is coming from. If it's coming from coal facilities, that's just not what we want. And I think that is a great example of like, you can come at things from a different direction, but still kind of get to this is the way we get there. And it requires seeing, and I think the U.S., we've gone through a lot of different phases. Obviously after Sputnik, there was a huge government decided we've got to get to space. No state can do that. No set of billionaires can do that. And it's something that we do need a robust government to do. And I think that's a real struggle right now. I think that's a big, that's part of the fracture I think we have in the U.S. over should everything be outsourced to SpaceX, or should NASA still kind of have a role? And kind of what does that look like?
Energy is a very basic thing like roads, right? I mean, this infrastructure, it just makes sense that you have to have something larger. But to sort of tie it together, I asked ChatGPT if Tennessee could be the best state to build this small modular reactor. And it's listed number 1 as Idaho. However, it's listed Tennessee as number 2. And it's
pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. It says Idaho has the Idaho National Laboratory.
That's right.
And that
they have that. And the whole point of Idaho National Lab are reactors. They have reactor technology. But they're I'm not buying it.
No, because I mean, I think Tennessee has a rich history in being able to bring all of the pieces, right? It's not about hospitals, it's about all of the supporting roles and companies that do it, and we're centrally located, and we were able to get this here. Same thing with like the music industry. It's not about just the musicians, it's about the producers and the audio engineers. And so I think our location, our tax structure, along with everything else, I mean, Idaho, it's way over there.
It's way over
there.
I want Tennessee to be a leader in it, but honestly, I want, if
Whoever
Idaho builds it first, then we will be second. I mean, let them absorb it the first.
Yeah, right. Just so maybe you want to call
somebody to do
that.
Right.
Call Idaho and push them along. So, what do you think? Because this feels like a very bipartisan issue. You guys are agreeing on everything. What are you? Other than cost, what do you think that you'll hit up against? Let's say, this becomes a reality. I don't know, the federal government decides that they're going to issue a check, and then it's up to us to decide whether to accept it. What do you think that you'll hit up against with your caucuses?
Well, I'll start, but it is a bipartisan issue in my opinion. Now, I will say I have a tougher job than I think Clark does in convincing my caucus, not just in the state. I mean, a nationwide caucus. Generally speaking, from an environmentalist standpoint, they tend to vote blue. And I think there's still some convincing that needs to happen. There's a lot of preconceived notions, but President Obama was the first to declare it as green energy. Nuclear is green energy. So that was a huge step. But I think there's still some challenges within the Democratic Party in terms of fully embracing it over renewables, or which is the wind and solar. But that's just not base load. I don't think we've defined base load. That's a great term. Base load means not highs or lows. What does it take to minimally run the city of Nashville? And then if you have games and hot weather or super cold weather, it can go up. But what's your base load? You can have all the wind and solar, and it can't reach that base load, and that's really what we're trying to get to. So you have to have coal or gas or nuclear for that. So just trying to, that's from my standpoint. I consider myself a salesman, but both inside and outside the party. But it's growing. But I probably have a little.
It is fascinating. You see, I remember when Bredesen left office and went and started Silicon Ranch. A lot of people seem to say, this is insane. There's no way that this solar company can be based in Tennessee because we don't have enough light. We don't have enough hours of light. And he was basically like, it doesn't work yet, but it will because of how fast the technology is moving. And he was obviously right. Silicon Ranch has become so they just got a $500 million investment from a new investor. And it seems like they're really rolling. But what I hear you saying is even those, it's great to have things like that in Tennessee, but it's still that's not how you can meet the challenge of the base load in cities like Knoxville and Nashville and Memphis and Chattanooga. Does that seem fair?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. It's almost like it's not a either or, it's and.
It should be. It's a mix. It's the energy mix.
And so to the extent we can also build up some of those other renewable sources and decrease whatever it takes over here to help us get to the base, great. But we need a solid backup source that we can.
It's another example of Tennessee innovating in the space generally of alternative, energy and renewable energy, and so I think that's something we can all celebrate as a positive. Yeah.
What do you think that you would face if it were a reality tomorrow and you could bring a bill in your caucus?
Well, my caucus and honestly, the Democrats have been receptive to nuclear, I believe. I mean, we get it really is a bipartisan thing. But in my caucus, and I'll have to tell you, I know that we're shifting away from coal, but I'm not I'm more of a conservationist than I am an environment. I'm not really an environmentalist at all. So to me, if we kept coal another decade and came into nuclear organically, I would probably be okay with that. But one thing I learned from going to the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute and coming back is this is happening. We can get on board with it or not. And so I came back and I started talking to my caucus, and I would say, this has less carbon output, and they'd be like, whoa, easy, buddy. Hey, what they do to you out there? And I'm like, no, I mean, it's the public doesn't like car, and the emission.
I'll use different words.
Yeah, and I would talk about emissions, and they'd be like, oh, hey, easy. And I think that in my caucus, there's a lot of people, they like nuclear, but oftentimes I will take a field trip somewhere. I'll take my committee to a coal plant or a nuclear plant or something like that. And oftentimes when they get a captive audience with TVA, they start lecturing them and saying, why are you shutting down these coal plants? And they spend all their time doing that. And I'm like, listen, they have to. These guys that man this plant did not choose to shut it down. There's a higher level. Right. But I think a lot of people, in my caucus, would like to go back to coal. And although I understand what they're saying, and I'm kind of was it Sarah Palin back when she was like, no, it was somebody, T. Boone Pickens, that's who it was.
T. Boone
Pickens. He said, do it all. Let's do solar, let's do nuclear, let's do coal, let's do everything. And I think that getting my caucus on board with the fact that society is shifting into a more environmentally friendly, that the public wants cleaner energy, and we're going to have to make changes to accommodate them. And so I have come to that. I've come to terms with that to the point that I'm going to hydrogen conferences now. So I get it, but I think sometimes it's hard for members of my party to come on board with that.
Well, I think that's why it's a really good point. I think the best lawmakers out there understand that we may identify with a certain party, but I feel liberal in many areas, and yet I'm a small business owner and could look less liberal in other areas, right? It's being open to understanding that we're given a structure that we can work within, and whatever we're going to given, we're going to make the best of it, and we're going to push forward and not just sit back and be bypassed. So I think that's a good.
And science is pretty bipartisan. It doesn't care what you
Does
think
not
about
care.
it.
Yeah, that's true.
I can see this being an issue though that you might be able to get through pretty easily, just because everybody's eyes just kind of glaze over after you get past the nuclear is safe. After you cross that, then okay,
I feel
sure.
like if you had a bunch of explainer videos about like why these can't have these meltdowns like these old reactors could, I think it would only take a few of those people to go, huh, that seems pretty good.
Yes.
It does seem like things that are smaller seem less dangerous. So just from a very basic kind of intuitive communication level, I think that's how.
There's actually a comic book out that does some of that. And
there you go.
I'm thinking about ordering a few passed
I
out
like
to
that.
the
Yeah.
General Assembly.
How long do you think, I mean, just in your research and people that you've talked to, how long do you think that it would take, and I know we don't know, but to start with these SMRs to actually getting something? Do we have anything we can compare it to historically?
The hard part is we're unfortunately, especially in Washington, we're hyper partisan. And I think things get momentum and then they get derailed. So I would say, with that caveat, if everyone was full bore on that, there are no political shifts and ebbs, yeah, I really think in a decade we could be at a point where we're producing and citing these things every year, every other year. Now that's still a lot. We got a lot to build out a grid. But once we get through this first, a proof of principle, we get the cost down to where a company like NES could say, I need one of those, and I can incentivize TVA to build one, but they can't do it today. They can't give $1 billion, but they can give a few $1 million toward that if it's going to help their grid. I would think those would be some of the conversations that we could have a decade to 15 years from now. I don't know.
I agree. I think we're a decade out, but I think the next decade you could start seeing them. A lot of the components could be factory built. I mean, they could come out here with a large semi truck and and put it together. So it wouldn't be like, we're going to build this for 3 years. I mean, you could come together and have it built in a month. If you connect everything together and get it up and running.
Why doesn't the federal government, why aren't they, I mean, from your perspective, giving the money to do this? Or, because every state could give a little bit, or the federal government could come in. Why hasn't that happened since it's a...
Well, as you heard Clark said, I forgot that number. The Department of Energy is going to match the grant. How much for the deal?
$800 million.
$800 million. So,
yeah.
Department of Energy is giving close to $1 billion for this one project. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they kind of work and manage those plants. They're trying to get their regulations in order. At one point, it was just too hard to build.
Right.
They were, told no every time. Yeah, you got to redo this, redo that. They're kind of right sizing and getting their act together in terms of saying yes more than no. Bring me back a different rock. So it's a mix. But I think over the last 8 years, we've been positioning ourselves, and it's kind of like the bamboo shoot. You have to get the infrastructure, the underground right. I think we're about to start coming out the ground at this point, unless something gets derailed. Now, if there's an accident somewhere, we're back to square one, right? They don't want to hear about small nuclear.
Right.
But I really think the government, we're not where we should be. But I do think that we're gaining momentum in a bipartisan way that people realize we're going to have to invest if we really want this.
Yeah. Well, I love this, and I appreciate you guys coming on, because I think it's important to know that there are really intelligent people who are having these conversations in our legislature right now, because I think often what you see is, we talk about this every episode, but, you'll have somewhere, let's say 85% of the bills that go through are, bipartisan. And then on the news, what I think people see is this, contentious nature of
the food fight.
The food fight.
Fight. And I think that there are very few people who would be thinking that, hey, there are people that are going to these conferences that are really exploring this at an early time and are really putting the energy in. So I commend you both for putting that in, because while we may not see the full effects of it in our lifetime, I feel like we're really setting it up for generations to follow us. So But thank you guys for joining us for another episode
I enjoyed
of
it.
Spirit of Bipartisanship. So we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by Lachlan Insurance Advisors, a locally owned and operated insurance agency in Nashville. Lachlan Insurance Advisors has a team of insurance agents and advisors licensed in personal and commercial lines. Lachlan is dedicated to providing objective advice and custom coverage options from an array of curated, industry-leading carriers. To learn more about Lachlan Insurance Advisors, get free quotes for home, including short-term rental properties, auto, life, or commercial insurance, or to review your current insurance coverage, call them today at 615-266-0246 or visit them online at heylachlan.com.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Climbing the Charts podcast. If you're loving what you're hearing, head over to your podcast app and leave us a rating and review to let us know your thoughts. We can't wait to hear from you. Until next time.